This bulletin is coming to you live from the Joy 99.7 FM studios, Kokomlemle in Accra, at digital address GA0993341. Also live on Love 99.5 FM in Kumasi, affiliates across the country, including A1 Radio in Bogatanga, Jubilee FM in Keta. It's on ABN Radio in London and around the world at myjoyonline.com. The news is brought to you by UMB Bank, UMB Speed Up, DigiBank. Let's go. And coming up, minority in Parliament demands immediate withdrawal of fresh taxes and proposed increment announced by Finance Minister.
We call on the government to immediately, as a matter of urgency, withdraw this obnoxious increment and ensure that the people of Ghana enjoy some. We shall use whatever legitimate means possible, both in and out of Parliament, to compel them to do so.
Meanwhile, Chamber of Communications wants government to reconsider the increase in communication service tax.
We do not think that the CST is the best way of funding this. What we would, and we hope that we'll be able to engage the ministry to look at other ways in which we would be able to generate a lot more taxes.
We'll bring you all the reactions also as the dust settles on the controversy of the militia in the Heart of the Nation documentary. There are now questions about sanctions for those responsible for the presence of the DI group at the Osu Castle.
And that is criminal because they are not licensed to do it.
And that it has to take a reinforcement, joint effort. It cannot be just a group of some ideal unemployed young men and women. It cannot be.
Also, former President Mahama promises to provide 6 newly created regions with a regional hospital each when he wins the 2020 elections.
New regions here, regional hospital.
We'll hear from him as he continues his tour of the Bono region. And in sports,
Ghana Olympic Committee sanctions 2 members implicated in the Australia visa scandal.
And U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi visits Cape Coast and Elmina castles to pay homage to the sacrifices of African ancestors.
It is now part of all of our heritage. I want to extend the bowl of the Congress of the United States with an invitation to visit us there.
We have all that and more coming up here on the Midday News with me, Emefa Apau. We settle for the details now because the minority in Parliament is demanding the immediate withdrawal of fresh taxes announced by Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta. At yesterday's mid-year budget review, government, while abolishing the luxury vehicle tax, introduced a 90 pesos per gallon tax on petrol and diesel, as well as the increment of communication tax from 6% to 9%. We'll hear the minority shortly, but first, my colleague Raymond Akwa brings us highlights of the minister's presentation.
Let's start with jobs because government insists that as of mid-year, some 57 one district, one factory projects which were in operation have provided over 50,000 direct and indirect jobs across the 16 regions of the country. It also maintains some 3,000 jobs have been saved from the banking sector cleanup alone. Now, some form of clarity was also brought to the projects expected under the Zongo's development agenda as the minister explained what government was going to do this year. Well, there was no mention of skyscrapers or Villaggio-like structures as the housing minister had hinted earlier. On taxes, the minister announced the removal of the luxury vehicles tax. This means for those who own cars with engine capacity of 3,500 cc, like some Toyota Land Cruiser Prados, you would revert to paying only 150 cedis and save 1,000 cedis when you go to renew their roadworthy certificate. Of course, government will miss out on the 21.3 million cedis it accrued from the luxury tax during the first 5 months of its implementation. On the other side, the energy sector levies were increased for the same Land Cruiser Prado car which required 400 cedis to fill its tank. It will now need 412 cedis to fill the same tank. And if this happens every 5 days, it will translate into a cost of 876 cedis per year to run your car, resulting in an actual savings of some 124 cedis if you compare with the 1,000 cedis luxury tax removed. For liquefied petroleum gas, which got an increase of 8 pesos per kilogram, you will pay some 1 cedi 70 pesos more. For example, in 2015, a typical 40.5 kg LPG cylinder cost 48 cedis, and a bag of charcoal then was also 40 cedis. While a bag of charcoal is now 45 cedis, the same 14.5 kg LPG cost 81 cedis 70 pesos. While it's unclear how this will promote the use of LPG, which was introduced as a cheaper, environmentally friendly and healthy fuel for mostly low-income homes that used wood fuel.
Raymond Nakwa with that breakdown. Well, reactions to the finance minister's presentation has been coming in thick and fast. Earlier today, the minority addressed a news conference. Here's minority spokesperson on finance, Kasiel Atoforsen.
The populist policies adopted by President Akufo-Addo have come full cycle and are drawing all the gains made from the fiscal consolidation period to the coming into the office of the NPP. It has become obvious that the NPP has no intention of keeping their promises to Ghanaians. The imposition of taxes, fuel prices, adjustment, and the resolution of the general hardship facing Ghanaians. The media budget presented by the minister responsible for finance only offers gloom and portends very difficult times for the people of Ghana. There is therefore the need for President Akufo-Addo and his government to change the course, or they will plunge this economy into a bigger challenge.
Now, former Deputy Power Minister and Yape Kusago MP John Jinapo says they will be compelled to agitate against the proposed increments.
We are in this mess because somewhere in 2018, President Akufo-Addo and the NPP decided to usurp the powers of the PURC by proceeding to announce a populist but unwise decision of a 17% reduction in tariffs. Following that 17% reduction, it has led to a huge, colossal debt. Today, what they are telling you, the ordinary Ghanaian, is that you enjoyed this 17% for about 1 year. It has created a debt. So they are going to impose that in the form of taxes on petroleum so that you would come and pay for that amount. It is not because of a so-called excess capacity. It is because of a complete failure of a government that decided to subsidize power but failed to make provision and pay for that. We call on the government to immediately, as a matter of urgency, withdraw these obnoxious increments and ensure that the people of Ghana enjoy some hope. We shall use whatever legitimate means possible, both in and out of Parliament, to compel them to do so.
Meanwhile, energy think tank Africa Center for Energy Policy is urging government to develop a strategy that holds the growth of debts in the energy sector. Executive Director for ACEP, Ben Boache, has been speaking on the Super Morning Show.
I think for the energy sector, it is difficult at this point to really push for raising more money because the tariff has already gone up. So to raise more money, then means you have to get the public to pay more. But what is crucial at this point is for us to have a strategy that actually freezes the debt accumulation, stop us from accumulating more debt.
Okay.
If you are paying $100 million a month for energy sector challenges, that is not sustainable. So how do you deal with that to ensure that you can halt the growth of the debt in the energy sector, and then the ESLA then becomes relevant in dealing with the outstanding debt. It's what we really have to do. So tough decisions have to be taken. Which power plants we have to cancel immediately to see if you have to pay a consequence of $100 million is better than paying $1 billion.
Also on the Super Morning Show was Chief Executive of the Ghana Chamber of Telecommunications, Ken Ashigbe, who says government should reconsider the increase in communication service tax because there are other ways to generate revenue without burdening Ghanaians with more taxes.
Time since I joined the chamber that we've had any major tax conversation where we've not had a tax dialogue, we've not had these conversations. So we do not think that the CST is the best way of funding this. But we are open and we hope that we'll be able to engage the ministry to be able to look at other ways in which we would be able to generate a lot more taxes. We say that a large percentage of us are really not paying the taxes that we ought to pay, and it would take a lot more innovation. It will take a lot more, rethinking the way we do our things to be able to let this happen. But for an industry that already pays 40%, back to government in forms of taxes, regulatory fees and all of that, increasing the incidence of tax on it itself really is not in the interest of the country. And we hope that we'll be able to sit with the policymakers and the regulators to really be able to look at that to see how do we ensure that we can increase Ghana's revenue growth envelope so that we will be able to fund the things that we do, and not only that, would we also be able to cut out a lot of the waste, cut out a lot of the inefficiency when it comes to generating this revenue. And definitely if we are able to push the government people to government payment, go digital, definitely that is going to increase the cash that comes to the government.
You heard the Chief Executive of the Ghana Chamber of Telecommunications, Ken Ashigbe, speaking there on the Super Morning Show today. You're still listening to the Midday News on Joy 99.7 FM. Let's go on to some other stories now. Government said it felt vindicated when the NMC ruled to sustain the state's argument that the Joy News documentary Militia in the Heart of the Nation had a misleading advertisement. Now, the commission claimed that the use of a background that showed the worrying activities of militia groups in the country was unethical. Joy News has contested the ruling. But while the government claims vindication, there are questions about sanctions for those who allow the commander, Nana Reku Addo Elias Choman, and his team of young men and women to operate at the former seat of government. Joy News editor Fifi Kumsen reports.
In the documentary, Joy News established the presence of the group operating illegally at the former seat of government. The state did not contest this, except to say that the people were
a group of young men and women dressed up in white shirts and black suits, converging at the castle Osu in the belief that jobs will be found for them.
Information Minister Kojo Oponkroma, at a news conference in March this year, indicated that the leader, Nana Reku Addo, also known as Choman, had been appointed by the Mahama administration to do a job of asset retrieval for the state, finished in 2018, but decided to operate his own business from the castle.
After the conclusion of the work of the task force in August 2018, he subsequently converted the office allocated to him into a private business office for the stated purposes of his company.
Mr. Oponkroma said the situation was handled immediately it was discovered.
But it was quickly dealt with in October 2018 when he was evicted from the premises by a joint operation involving personnel of the National Security Secretariat and the Ghana Police Service.
But that's the problem. The government does not talk about who took responsibility and whether anyone has been sanctioned for allowing an unregistered security company to run from the Osu Castle. Here is private legal practitioner Ace Ankoma speaking on the matter earlier this year. He said the eviction was not enough.
Eviction means you can go and sin no more. But this is these guys on the face of it are as guilty as sin. But they evicted and they have the temerity, impudence, audacity to return to the prime real estate, the old slave fort, and then have to be re-evicted. And so, you see, that's my problem. The law just does not work in this country.
Mr. Ankuma said the state must have ensured the prosecution of the people.
This is their own clear admission that they are operating to the extent that they don't have a license.
How do you arrest a group you evicted and may not know where they are?
Well, you evicted and they came back. And they only yesterday or 2 days ago went back to re-evict. Who did they evict? They didn't evict chairs and tables. They evicted people. There should not have been eviction. There should have been an arrest.
But this is critical when in government's own statement, signed and read by Mr. Oponkroma, the people were not permitted to operate at the state facility. He said,
admittedly, this should not have been allowed to happen in the first place.
Former GFA spokesperson Randy Abe said someone must take responsibility for the operation of the group at the castle.
Is anybody being held responsible? So now the focus is on, are they militia? They're not. Do they have a disposition to violence? They are not. But the truth of the matter is that, look, so if you have a situation where there's a running battle between a group and the national security, and on 3 occasions, the national security is unable to kick them out, and that it has to take a reinforcement, joint effort. It cannot be just a group of some ideal unemployed young men and women. It cannot be.
But in all this, the narrative by government has been about nomenclature, how the people should be called, vigilante or militia, but very silent on the prosecution of the group or sanction for whoever's negligence led to the occupation of the group at the castle.
Joining us editor Fifi Kumson's report. Now, International Media Freedom Organization, Reporters Without Borders, has backed Ghana's Defend Media Freedom campaign. Daphne Pellegrino, who is North America Advocacy Officer for the organization, says it's exciting that media organizations and personnel are standing up and defending themselves. She was speaking to Joy News at the Congress of the International Federation of Agriculture Journalists in the USA.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an incredible thing. To see journalists supporting journalists is a huge, huge step toward the kind of freedoms that we are working toward every day ourselves. And we can't do it without journalists who are reporting on these issues and who are supporting one another. So that's incredible. Yeah, no, we are seeing that across the world. I mean, journalists supporting journalists is something that's happening not just in Ghana, but in the United States and in Latin America, and ensuring that the stories of journalists who are killed, like in Ghana, or arrested, or being told is a huge step toward liberation for journalists.
And what role or what support do you think ordinary members of the public can give to some of these campaigns? So they
ordinary members of the public?
Yes.
I mean, understanding the role that journalists play as being critical to the functioning of a healthy society is the first step. And I do think that there needs to be better education across the globe in media literacy so that the public understands the role that journalists play, the work that they're doing, how they find the truth. And I think that's a critical first step.
You heard Daphne Pellegrino. She is with the Reporters Without Borders and heads the North American Advocacy Group and is also calling for action across the world to end cyber harassment of journalists, warning it could result in physical attacks on them. And remember, you can also join the discussion and the campaign with the hashtag Defend Media Freedom. Now, flag bearer of the opposition National Democratic Congress, John Dramani Mahama, has promised to provide all the 6 newly created regions with a regional hospital each if he wins the 2020 elections. He was speaking at the Techiman after the inauguration of a regional office complex for the NDC as part of his 2-day working visit to the newly created Bono East region.
We in the NDC had a policy of putting up regional hospitals in all regions. So we put up 6 new regional hospitals when we return. That is a promise we will fulfill.
Now, my colleague Anas Sabit is our regional correspondent and he will join us shortly with more on the former President John Mahama's tour. But the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, has reaffirmed government's determination to fulfill the campaign pledge of facilitating year-round farming in the northern regions through the construction of dams under the One Village, One Dam program. Speaking at the launch of activities marking the 20th anniversary of the Tertiary Education Students Confederacy, TESCON, the student wing of the New Patriotic Party in Accra yesterday, Dr. Bawumia dismissed attempts by the opposition NDC to cast doubt on the construction of these dams. Listen.
We have One Village, One Dam that is on board. Very important dams that are being built, but they have the audacity to criticize them. They go and take pictures of uncompleted dams and then say this is what the NPP is doing. But we are going to complete all of those dams. But I have a message for them. Our dams are not like guinea fowls that will fly. The dams are going to be here in Ghana. If they are not well done, we will do them well.
You heard the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. Now let's head to the court because an Accra High Court has dismissed an application filed by lawyers for NDC National Chairman Samuel Ofosu-Ampor for seeking to put his trial on hold. Justice Samuel Isiedu ruled that the application is without merit as it raises no exceptional circumstances meriting a halt of the trial. Fifi Kumson, Joy News editor, joins me in studio with details of that court proceedings.
Yes, our court correspondent has been telling us that Mr. Ampofo's lawyers had earlier filed an application urging the court to strike out the charge of assault leveled against him. Then the court dismissed that application. His lawyers are currently seeking to overturn this decision at the Court of Appeal. Lead counsel Tony Letha asked that the court halt proceedings pending determination of the appeal. Now, state prosecutors, however, opposed the application, insisting nothing barred the court from proceeding with the trial, since the Court of Appeal has not granted any such request. Now, Justice Asiedu dismissed the application, adjourning the case to October 17 for the state to call its first witness.
So that's the proceedings in court today. The midday news will take a quick break. But first, a recap of our top stories. Minority in Parliament demands immediate withdrawal of fresh taxes and proposed increment announced by Finance Minister. And also, as the dust settles on the controversy over the militia in the heart of the nation documentary, there are now questions about sanctions for those responsible for the presence of the DI group at the Osu Castle. And still to come, U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi visits Cape Coast and Elmina castles to pay homage to the sacrifices of African ancestors.
It is now part of all of our heritage. I want to extend the bowl of the Congress of the United States with an invitation to visit us there.
We'll get a live update as she joins her African-American colleagues to commemorate the 400th year since the enslaved people were forced to leave their homeland. We're right back after this break.
My name is Kwame Sefakai, and most of you know me as a media personality, but I am also a family man. The UMB mobile banking app, UMB Speed App, saves me so much time by letting me do almost all of my banking transactions on my phone. The cardless withdrawal feature allows me to withdraw cash from any UMB ATM without an ATM card. I can also pay bills, transfer money, request for a loan, invest money, and so much more. So now, I can spend less time at the bank and more time with the ones I love. Bank anywhere and anytime with a UMB mobile banking app, UMB Speed App, and get the time to do what you love most. Download the UMB Speed App from your Android, iOS, or Windows phone today. Call 0302-633-988 for more information. UMB Speed App, Digibank, let's go!
Thanks for staying with us here on the Midday News. Time for sports, and Benedict Owusu has the very latest. Benedict?
Yes, my friend. The Ghana Olympic Committee has sanctioned two members implicated in the Australia visa scandal. Now, the two, Theophilus Ezi and Paula Chu, added names and tampered with the accreditation process for the Games. And Theophilus Ezi has lost his position as the deputy treasurer, with Paula Chu, who is the first vice president of the GOC, stripped off his post as the chef de mission for Team Ghana at next year's Olympic Games in Tokyo. Here's GOC President Beninu Mensah.
The decision, Congress took decision to expel an officer from the GOC for attempting to influence accreditation process or to influence names that were being added to people who were going to go to Australia. We also took a decision that per conduct of an officer, he was not deemed well enough to lead us as a chef de mission. So these are things that I think that in a very subtle way, Congress is telling Ghanaians that, look, we all need to be very disciplined and we need to stick to the rules. No matter who you are, when you do wrong, the rules of the institution need to be applied and applied very well.
So that's the GOC President Beninu Mensah.
Now let's head to the Central Region, because the U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi is currently visiting the Cape Coast and Elmina castles to pay homage to Africans who were enslaved and sent to the U.S. The U.S. legislature is part of a delegation comprising members of the Congressional Black Caucus as part of the celebrations in Ghana, which is the Year of Return Ghana 2019. And it's a major landmark marketing campaign targeting the African American and members of the diaspora to mark 400 years of the first enslaved African arriving in Jamestown, Virginia.
You have touched our soul with the privilege of visiting this place. Thank you so much. It is now part of all of our heritage. On behalf of our delegation, I want to extend the bowl of the Congress of the United States with an invitation to visit us there soon.
Richard Kojonyako is our correspondent, and he's traveling with her and joins us on the line with more on this. Richard, so what are their impressions from their visit so far?
Well, MFA first, it was such an emotional journey for the U.S. delegation led by the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. The delegation arrived here at the Elmina Castle 9:30. They were welcomed by the Omahini of Edna traditional area, Nana Kojo Kondia, and the Omahini, in his brief remarks, profoundly stated that the pains of the Ghanaian and the African whose ancestors were taken through the slave trade won't go away if the U.S. does not turn its attention to help develop Africa. So, virtually, Karen Bass, the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, also even stated that she considers the visit as a fitting and proper way to commemorate the 400 years since enslaved people were forced to their homelands and sent in bondage. So currently we are at the palace, the palace of the chief of the Cape Coast traditional area, and then we'll go to the Cape Coast Castle where the speaker will make a journey to the door of no return, and will be an extremely, some moment, emotional moment for the speaker and delegation that also came here.
You heard the Central Regional Correspondent Richard Kujo Nyako there. Now, some residents living around Mamobi Polyclinic are accusing government of unfairly demolishing their structures. They say government gave them only 2 days to pack out of the area, and many have been rendered homeless. Excavators were seen in the area earlier today pulling down buildings, though residents say some monies were paid to the assemblyman who had earlier assured them the exercise will be postponed. Nancy Emefa Dradosi was there. We'll get her report later on the Midday News. Now, let's go on to some other issues. We'll go to WAEC shortly whilst we wait for Nancy Emefa Jadosi's report here on the Midday News. We'll take a quick break. We're right back.
This news broadcast from Joy FM is also heard live on Love FM in Kumasi, as well as our affiliates, ATL FM in Cape Coast, Radio Max in Takrade, Radio Jubilee in Keta, Radio Justice and Bishava Radio in Tamale, Saboba FM, Volta Premier in Ho, Lolonyo FM in Hohoi, Sky FM in Sunyani, Radio A1 in Bolgatanga, and worldwide on the internet at myjoyonline.com.
Thanks for staying with us here on the Midday News. Let's head to Parliament quickly because there's a debate in there. The Interior Minister is answering questions on what government is doing about the rescue of the 3 missing Takrady girls. My colleague Parker Wilson is in Parliament and joins us on the line. So is a minority or are all satisfied with the Interior Minister's response so far to questions posed about the 3 missing Takrady girls? Hello, Parker.
Hello, Amifa.
I'm asking if members of Parliament are satisfied with the responses given by the Interior Minister so far.
Oh, not at all. James Agaga, who filed the urgent question, was not happy that the Interior Minister was telling what he calls impolitic, because the Minister, when he was answering the question, so to do a comparison of the kidnappings that went on under the NDC administration and what is happening under the NPP administration, and making the point that the NPP has tried, the NPP performed better or is performing to resolve a lot of the kidnapping cases that have gone on under the administration. And for the minority, they think that it wasn't the best of answer. The minister should have talked about how government or measures being put in place by government to rescue the 3 Takrady missing girls.
You heard that my colleague Parker Wilson reporting from Parliament. Will get details in our subsequent bulletins. Now, the West African Examination Council, WAEC, says it has identified some invigilation lapses at some centres for the 2019 West African Senior High School Certificate Examination last March, resulting in a soar of the number of results withheld by the council this year. Head of Public Relations Agnes Tay Kujo tells Joy News the number is an increase from last year, where 26,434 results were withheld. We'll hear from her later in our subsequent bulletins. And just before we go, though, now let me tell you about the story of a Takrady-based taxi driver, Patrick Mensah, alias Mr. Eventuary, whose sudden rise to fame has been making the headlines. He became a social media sensation with some trending videos. But today, Mr. Eventuary has earned a role in popular Ghanaian courtroom satirical comic TV series, Kejetia versus Makola, as a lawyer. He's been staking a claim for the sport on Showbiz A to Z with Na Ashoko.
You don't know about it.
Until now, he was a taxi driver in the western region town of Takrade, cracking residents up with his wit and happy-go-lucky character. This was how Patrick Mensah started.
I started driving 2006, but I started small, but I'm still driving. But when I'm age of 15 years, I started joking.
He has since become a social media sensation.
Some of them are criminal. It can take your criminal. It can take your money eventually. Really? Yeah, for vanishing.
The young man, nicknamed Mr. Eventuary, responds to many names.
My house name is Kofi Annan. But my guy name is Boge.
Now we'll hear more of that report on Newsnight later. But what's trending on social media, Mapitso?
Laugh like killer. Well, people are still talking about the mid-year budget review. At Rob Afo says we expect more U-turns from this government, especially when the election is around the corner. And Abdul Aziz says it's good news for us all. However, the fact of the matter is that policy has been underperforming. Etogbe Ehe says withdrawal of the levy will not change what Ghanaians have decided to do on the day of voting.
And it's time for the vanishing here on the Midday News with me, Emefa Apau. There's more news when you log on to myjoyonline.com. Have a great afternoon.